pre-prohibition lager versus today lager.
Yeah, sure. So I did a lot of reading on this when I made a pre-prohibition. I'm going to pull up the recipe so I can kind of speak more
Mm-hmm.
in concrete terms about what I wound up doing. But in pre-prohibition lagers, because it's I think there's kind of a before prohibition and after that, and it still impacts things to this day. Because of what happened with the beer style and the homogenization of the beer styles and kind of all the little breweries that were at play before prohibition that just couldn't come back in the face of the bigger ones kind of taking over. So anyway, it's just kind of a fascinating history, and I'm by no means an expert, but I had fun doing a lot of digging when I made this beer because I really wanted to understand, kind of what people were doing before prohibition and kind of what the influences were and so on. So I think the big thing is well, there's two big things. Three. Uh, One is 6 row, not 2 row. So the one I made, I used only six. Well, I used some other grains, but the base grain was all 6 row. And the interesting thing about 6 row is people kind of turn their noses up at it these days, but it actually has kind of more diastatic power. And in some other writings that I was reading, it was preferred back then, even though they had 2 row, because it was seen as better for making beer. And certainly, and this is what comes into play, certainly when you're talking about the amount of adjuncts that you put into pre-prohibition lager, because adjuncts didn't have the negative stigma like they might today. And by adjunct, I don't mean like, just, corn syrup or something, but they tended to use a lot of flaked corn.
Mm.
So again, no diastatic power there. So the 6 row kind of balances that out. And then with the corn, you get a little bit of sweetness. So I ended up in the one I brewed using 73% 6 row, 22% flaked corn, and 5% carapils, just because I can't not put carapils in every beer pretty much. I should probably get out of the habit, but sometimes it doesn't need it. But anyway, and then the other thing is they're much more hoppy than the kind of mainstream lagers of today. They were
Okay.
kind of in the 30, 35, 40 range, not the single digits to maybe 10 or 12. And it's just a much more flavorful beer. The I think the corn adds that nice little bit of kind of creamy sweetness.
Mm-hmm.
And then I used cluster and Hallertau and Mittelfrüh hops. And actually, in this recipe, I used Cellar Science German yeast, which worked really well. And I think you just wind up with a really simple, clean, super flavorful, hoppy, but not so much that it's gonna, turn off people who think they don't like hops. And yeah, it was just that I got to make that one again because that beer was a lot of fun to make, and I can't think of anybody that tried it, whether they like beer or not, that didn't enjoy it. So
Well, that's cool. Yeah, I was like, yeah, when you're reading off that recipe, I was like, it's not too far off from like a cream ale I make. Like obviously,
yeah, yep, it's
I don't
very
use
similar.
6 row, I use 2 row, but I think the
Yep,
percentages were pretty spot on. Of course, I use different hops, but I mean, it was just the base. Like, wow, that sounds a lot like my cream ale. That's what I try to make at least once a year. I do enjoy it. It's
yeah,
just easy, smooth
I love cream
drinking.
ales.
So
Yeah.
yeah, super simple. I think isn't that the only American style cream ale? I think all the other ones are
Uh,
European
I
influenced.
don't. I mean, going back, yeah. I mean, kind of the. I don't even know because you got Belgian pale ales. I was going to say pale ales were kind of like
Mm,
in terms of the craft movement in the '80s. That was kind of like the quintessential American, pale ale with
yeah.
Cascade hops or whatever. But certainly pale ale was not a new style. But yeah, you may be right. I honestly don't know.
I think I've heard that a
Kind of
couple
like
times throughout my
yeah,
time drinking various
or
types of
Kentucky
beers.
Kentucky Common is probably
That's another one too. Yeah, I want to try to make.
yeah,
I've not made one of those yet though. I've had them; they're delicious.
yeah.
I've,
I made one last year and I made the mistake of using what did I use? Chocolate rye.
okay.
And those components by them individually are okay, but the fact that I was using chocolate rye and I couldn't adjust the chocolate versus the rye, it didn't quite balance out. So I got to
Gotcha.
take another run at that and not do that again. It was an interesting experiment, but yeah, it's wasn't quite balanced in the way I wanted at the end of the day.